Good afternoon, everyone, and we are back with another very interesting educational series by HCH. So, amid this gloom and doom, when numbers are rising, plateauing, again rising, and we are seeing a lot of people, dear ones, getting infected, most of them recovering, but most of them not being that fortunate. One thing which is having a very deep impact on people during the second wave of COVID is कि चलो मुझे तो हो गया कोई बात नहीं, अगर अगर मेरा बच्चा इन्फेक्ट हो गया तो क्या होगा? बच्चों को क्या वायरस कोविड का इन्फेक्ट कर रहा है? अगर कर रहा है तो क्या करना चाहिए? टेस्ट कराना चाहिए कि नहीं कराना चाहिए? फीवर किसी और चीज के कारण तो नहीं है? अगर मैं पॉजिटिव हो गया तो मेरे बच्चों का क्या होगा? So these are the n number of questions which were coming to us, and hence we decided to have with us Dr. Sanjay Wazir, one of the senior most pediatrician and neonatologists in the country, to answer all these queries. Uh, Pardon me for my wearing a black chashma in the middle of this webinar, but I got conjunctivitis, but I didn't want to delay this webinar. Sir is very, very busy. He just told us that he has not stepped out of the hospital for more than 24 hours, and still he took us time for us. Thank you, Dr. Sanjay Wazir. Thanks for coming and joining us today, sir.
Thank you. It's always a privilege to be talking to you and to the audience, and sharing. Apart from the job at the hospital, it is always good to disseminate information, and that too authentic medication information, because many times I see WhatsApp and other things groups circulating so much of false information that, and it's human brain, because when there is fear, you are likely to be intimidated by the all the information which is coming across. So it's important to filter out. In fact, WHO recently came out with a cartoon saying in a COVID there is an info epidemic apart from the pandemic. So yeah, and all of us should look at what is an authentic news and what we need to percolate, because we end up giving so many things to children which may not be in the long-term health of the children or interest of the children.
And that's I think the credibility which our series has created with our more than 6 lakh patients and their families and viewers on our Facebook pages. To introduce Dr. Wazir, he's a graduate of Medical College Jammu and then a postgraduate in DM in neonatology from PJMR, one of my favorite institutes. He's a director of neonatal intensive care units and for all the Cloud9 hospitals in North India. Has a favor for publications, published more than 25 national and international publications. And after publishing, he's now even the reviewer of these international journals. So not losing much time, I welcome you, Dr. Wazir. My first question to you is, sir, how the first wave of Corona is different from the second wave of Corona for the kids? What has changed over the year?
So I think two things. The infectivity here is slightly higher. There is a mutant variant for us. We all know we're talking of a mutation which has hit the virus, and viruses are known to, in fact, any species for that matter is known to find ways to be able to survive. And one of the ways viruses survive this hostile environment is by changing its form or a mutation to form into, and some of them become lethal enough for the population. This time what we have seen, and I think everybody has kind of been privy to that kind of a news, with so many people requiring oxygen cylinders, so many deaths happening in near and dears, and more importantly, the children getting affected as well. Last time, at least in my practice, I didn't see much of the children getting affected. Probably the lockdown effect, probably whatever, but then that was less of a children affliction. And during the time when the lockdown was also not there, the number of children who were getting affected or even getting, sick or probably, positive also were much lesser than the current time. This time, in fact, last week before the lockdown, there was a flurry of infections among the children. And if you had one person in the home who was positive, it was almost given that the child or the other people in the children would in the family would get infected as well. So the infectivity rate is definitely higher. lethality in adults, pregnant women, and old age has been remarkably high at this time. Children are not having mortality as such, or the deaths for sure, but they have significant problems as far as respiratory concerns and other manifestations, and there runs a risk of what is known as a pediatric inflammatory multisystem disorder, which we have seen. And for strange reasons, we have seen a disease called Kawasaki disease, which used to be maybe 1 in 1 lakh population earlier incidents. That thing in the last 3 weeks, I've seen 2 cases, which means that's also virus-induced. Other diseases which may be flaring up, not necessarily infectious.
Right, sir. So you rightly pointed out, sir. Yeah, this is my observation also. कि family में अगर कोई भी positive आ गया है, तो this time the virus is so infective that then it spares none. And then, so there is one case scenario where the kids are getting affected from one of the family members itself. And then there is another case scenario where some symptoms emerge in children only, which point towards whether that kid can be COVID positive. So my first question to you here is, अगर family में कोई positive आया है, and the kids start showing symptoms, which is most commonly a fever, should that kid be, RT-PCR should be done on that kid? Is there any advantage or not? That's one. And secondly, what are the symptoms? Because I know fever is not the only symptoms which children are presenting in this virus. What are the various symptoms that viewers should be look out to for having a suspicion that this kid could be COVID positive?
So very interesting question. So there are among the 2 common things which people know of. I will talk about those first, and then we'll talk about the other manifestations which can happen. So if everybody talks about the loss of taste and smell, and I tell you about an authentic data which was like published last year, almost 13,000 babies between 0 to 9 years. Only 1% of them could perceive a loss of smell or the taste. And in children between 9 to 18 months, that again was a huge among the same database when I'm talking about, and they 10% had that kind of a symptom. So what I mean to say is just assuming based on loss of taste or smell is not the way to look at it in children, number 1. Number 2, when we talk about fever, so fever again, fever for shortness of breath in 0 to 9 years in this cohort of babies was seen in almost 60% of cases, and similarly almost 60% in the 9 to 18. What it means also, 40% of them may not have fever or may not have other manifestation, and which is slightly different from adults because almost 80 to 90% of people, our adults, have fever as their manifestation. So, which brings us to another question, that if we do not have fever, we do not have loss of senses, right? What are the other manifestations, which can happen? And in that scenario, it is older children may still be able to communicate. Smaller children may find it difficult to communicate, and it becomes sometimes difficult to ascertain that. And in that scenario, you must always maintain a persistent rhinorrhea or running nose for the child. A child who is extremely irritable, because this also causes body aches, and child may not be able to complain of a body ache, but may still be irritable and crying. Some of the patients may only have gastrointestinal symptoms, like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and may have no respiratory symptoms like that. And another feature which I've seen in some of the babies is like almost 10 or 15% may have severe headache, and they don't have fever, but they just have a headache, which is again a pointer that if you have a family member who is positive and the child gets any of those symptoms, then you assume that it's like COVID positive, because the secondary attack rate, the current or the attack rate within the families, as we just discussed, is quite high. Now, which brings also to the question which you said, should we get an RT-PCR done? The RT-PCR is not 100% sensitive. Its sensitivity is around 70%, which means that if I test 10 people who are known to be definitely positive, I test all of them, still 3 of them, despite having the disease, may test negative. Okay, which also means that we may falsely label them as not having COVID, which is what most people are doing and saying, okay, mera RT-PCR to negative aa gaya, to mujhe COVID nahi. That's a wrong assumption. So I would suggest then we do a test in medicine with the intent of changing the management. Okay, so if I say I have a child in the family, if I'm an adult in the family who's tested positive, now my child is also having fever, there is a fair chance, even if the test turns out negative, because the children are not going out, they're not partying, they're not going to school, they're not having any other source of, they're not having outside food. All this suggests that the most likely possibility of this child having COVID is quite high. And if I test this child, my management still remains the same. If I do not test the child, the management remains the same. So doing a test for RT-PCR is only if you have an alternate diagnosis in mind and you want to prove that alternate diagnosis is not the reason, or you say, somebody say, I have typhoid and I've been having this for some time and this is typhoid or COVID, then maybe you want to do a test. But clear-cut family member affected, other child affected, please do not rush to get the PCR done.
So the message which I have very clearly drawn from your responses for my viewers is that any symptoms in children, please do not take it lightly. Contact your pediatrician. Do not become doctors. Let the doctor decide which test to be done, what treatment to be done. It could be COVID, it could be non-COVID. जैसे सर ने बताया, नाक बहना, गला खराब होना, बुखार आना, सर दर्द होना, डायरिया होना, इरिटेबल होना, एक्टिविटी कम होना, ये बहुत सारी बीमारियों में होता है बच्चों में, सिर्फ कोविड में नहीं होता है. So my very, very sincere advice to all the parents is that if something like that happens, and if you have a positive person in the family, please contact the doctor for what test to be done. Adults mein to sir, people have found a way out now to this 30% of negative or whatever percentage by saying ki chalo CT kara lete hain. So CT has become an alternative to RT-PCR. Is that the same case in kids also? Or people self-prescribing CT scan for kids also?
Thankfully, I don't know about the rest of the country, but I can definitely vouch for Gurgaon. Then most of, we had a meeting online and then we decided, this is one futile exercise that people are doing. So even if you have, for example, COVID, and you are asymptomatic, you may still be having some kind of, CT findings. And, most of the algorithms on the treatment are not based on CT. Like I know this is everybody now has started talking in terms of numbers because that's easier to compare. So it's like मेरे तो CT करा लिया तो उसमें 15/25 का स्कोर है, 15 का है, 6 का है, तो मेरी बीमारी बड़ी है. And then 3 days later they saying okay उसका तो CT score 6 था तो अब वो hospitalized हो गया, अब बढ़ गया. So there is no progression based on CT and no treatment to be decided based on the CT. That's one thing, whether it's an adult world or the pediatric world. So you corroborate if you find so value of CT is if you find the symptoms are significantly suggesting COVID and the child is getting hypoxemic or and you think whether we need to use remdesivir, steroids and other combinations which are determined based on case to case. In that scenario, you would want to do a CT to see if there are CT findings suggestive of COVID because your RT-PCR is negative. Otherwise, it doesn't really change the management of the patient.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I completely agree. Aajkal mathematical solutions hai COVID ke. This is my CT value. This is my CORAD value. This is my SpO2 value. And this is the treatment I should get. I should be in the hospital.
Yeah.
Life is not that simple for doctors at least. But coming to back to the question that now, once the pediatrician says that I think that this child is COVID positive, what should the family do? Because it is very clearly in adults, ये mild है, ये moderate है, ये severe है, ऐसे isolate करना है. But for kids, there are so many questions. Do you isolate them separately? Do you breastfeed or them? Do they need to attend their classes or not? And when do we move from mild to moderate to severe, and what needs to be done for home isolation, mild cases, sir?
So as I said, most of the time in cases in children, it will be most of the time it will be mild case only. And COVID or coronavirus is one of the viruses like flu virus, like rhinovirus, like any other so viruses that we see, and this causes a flu-like symptom. So there are three disease kind of progressions in this thing. So one is you have a COVID, which means that you have a flu-like symptom in the upper respiratory tract infection, where we said like you would have fever, you have cough, cold, like you have sore throat and other things. Maybe very few of them, like, in children, I would suggest like not more than 0.5 to 1% actually go down into the lungs. So progression from upper respiratory tract into the lower respiratory tract, and that is what is known as COVID pneumonia, which is whether it is an adult or a child, that is what we need to be worried about, But that progression doesn't happen in most. But if it does, like, the first thing that you will have if the COVID pneumonia is affecting your lungs, the lung is like a sieve through which the air goes in. And if COVID is affecting and blocking that sieve, like your oxygenation would get affected. You may start breathing a little faster, like, and you have heard people talking about happy hypoxemia, blood VQ mismatch, or blood perfusion problems. So those are the ones you still will have some degree of breathing rate which goes high. So easier way for us to remember is to look at the. Somebody's also showing samples of COVID.
I request everyone to be on mute, please. Karika, can you mute everyone except Sir and me?
Correct. So one of the ways is to look at look at the chest of the child and see it like how that. So you can put your hand here, like I'll say. So this breathing. So this is one breath I have. This is two breaths. So a counting of the breaths is an easier way for the parents to be doing. And you must remember that if the child is having a fever which is slightly high, you may have slightly increase in the breathing rate. But in a non-febrile child or a non-fever child, infant, if the respiratory rate in less than 2 months is more than 60, 2 months to 1 year is more than 50, and more than 1 year to 5 years is more than 40, then you presume that there might be. Again, does not confirm. You need to always confirm and go to the doctor, but don't assume that he has a COVID pneumonia. That's number one. Number two is like look at a difficulty in breathing. Again, where the chest moves, like, where the chest and the abdomen move, this is a place where diaphragm is, or a muscle which. So if I have to breathe a little heavy, my chest will start going in and out. Any kind of a chest indrawing is again a sign of a baby who probably has kind of a lower respiratory tract involvement. And if you have a chance to have a pulse oximeter, now you can use the same pulse oximeter which adults are using for children also. Unfortunately, most of them are not medical grade ones, like, so they're made by companies, and most of them are kind of motion sensitive. So even if the children move, so you see the value going from 87 to 97, and then and this is the call I get from most parents. Abhi to 87 to 97 fluctuate kar raha hoga. That will never happen. So your saturation would be more or less in the consistent zone, maybe 2 or 3 points up and down in that particular range, but you'll be consistent in that range. So the only time when you need to do it, either you do it on the thumb of the child, if the finger is not an option because it's small finger. If that is not a possible, you can put it on the toe and do it when the child is sleeping, because that's the time. And when you look at a pulse oximeter value, either you will see a wave which is more consistent, suggesting a pulse wave coming there, or sometimes there is like kind of a bar value which is representative of the pulse. So it's moving in that direction. So there's a consistent signal coming from that, and that is the value you would want to look at. Any value which is more than 95 is a green zone for anyone else. And between 92 to 95, you would want to be cautious. Maybe, talk to the doctor, discuss what are the things, and less than 92, definitely you would need to go to the hospital.
And you took me back to my MBBS days, sir. Pneumonia, these were the things where we were told indrawing of chest, respiratory rate. And I think in kids, respiratory rate and indrawing of chest becomes much more important than saturation, because as you said, SpO2, which has now become the holy grail for adults, becomes very, very misleading in children. But somebody even asked me, can we put it on the ear of the children for the saturation?
So there are specific ones, not this one, like, which we use. There are specific ones where you can put it on the earlobe and you can get a saturation. So it's basically you get a pulse anywhere, and you have a surface back and forth where the light can transmit through that. You can pick up a pulse oximeter from anywhere. But those earlobe ones are not generally like available in the market. They're generally available in the hospitals.
Whatever you said, that mostly kids, they remain mild. Now, if the kids are mild with the symptoms which you mentioned, what precautions the parents need to take? What, as parents, they're supposed to do despite the prescription given by the pediatrician, and when they should panic or when they should not panic?
So very correct question. Most of the times you will panic, because the word itself is so dreadful, and all you hear is the negative news on the TV or in the social media. And if you do not subscribe to any of them, one of your friends would definitely call up by evening and said, "Ki halat bahut kharab hai," and then put you off. So so first thing that you must remember, that fever is because of a disease. Fever itself is not a disease. So many people would like get कि बुखार आ गया, इसका 102 fever हो गया, इसको fever इसका 103 हो गया, and they start panicking. They're like, height of fever does not correlate with the severity of illness. In fact, most people who would become sick are immune suppressed to the extent they would not mount a very high response. So it's like, so again, as I said, do not get fooled by the degree of fever. Fever is likely to last from somewhere between 2 days to 10 days, like, in many cases. General average is around 3 to 4 days, when you would have the fever coming down in children. But even if there is a height of fever, you want to use one medicine. If it doesn't work, maybe, your doctor would recommend based on your pre-existing illness or your previous history, another medicine. In case one doesn't work, you can use another one. But again, one of the things that in winters is to keep in the summers is to keep the room temperature on the lower side. So many times because of the fever, everybody like puts the cap on, head on, and then typical. And this is we used to do at one time when we did not have paracetamol, and आदमी का बुखार उतारने के लिए उसको इतने पसीने ले आते थे कि पसीने से बुखार कम हो जाता था. But that's no longer required. In fact, you go to a hospital, even if it is a most complex cardiac surgery, most complex neurological surgery, they will still have AC on all the time, whether it is a recovery, whether it is an operation theater. So at home, people do not need to be doing that. Covering children, loose clothes, wearing, keeping the room temperature on the lower side. And third important thing is to keep fluids as much as possible, because of the fever, you're losing latent heat from the surface. So you're actually likely to cause, a lot of dehydration from the surface. And because of the dehydration, your fever would also go up again. So what's known as a dehydration fever. So keep giving fluids at regular intervals and do not get worried about the height of fever, whether it's 100, 200, 300, 400. Then the second thing is, as I said, what should not alarm you is like uska khansi theek nahi ho rahi. Again, COVID is a disease. Like COVID itself would be ashamed if it doesn't cause cough and cold in life. So we expect that to happen. So please do not bother about like cough and cold. I know it's troublesome for parents to hear children cough, but cough again is a protective reflex. So if I have something stuck in my throat, I'm trying to do is like to throw out that, and that is something not bad. You need to suppress cough only if it is exhausted or it is causing the child to vomit out the food every time. So that's called post coughing vomiting. So if you have that kind of a scenario, you may want to stop it, but or it's getting exhausted and the children, like for example, is happening every half an hour, 45 minutes, and the bouts of cough are happening. Yes, for sure that you would want to do it. But if the child is coughing a couple of times in a day, please do not suppress that cough like at any You can use honey, ginger, something to soothe the throat if throat is the cause of this thing. Now, what you should definitely do is to make sure that like you hydrate, as I said, and especially if you have vomiting, diarrhea or anything at that point of time, you should probably just say you would want to give a lot of fluids with electrolytes, like, because you don't want them to get dehydrated and have electrolyte imbalance. So one of the major problems with those who develop pneumonia in children is a condition called SIDH, and where you have like a lot of sodium being lower in the body. So it's something that we need to be cautious about. And in terms of diet, which parents ask me, like, कि कोरोना की कौन सी diet है? ऐसी कोई diet बनी नहीं है. In fact, India is the only country where we find things before the world can find it. Where it was dengue, we found goat's milk. When dengue did not get cured with goat milk, we found papaya leaves. Like, and the rest of the world is still struggling to find out how does it work. So we tend to see, okay, overemphasize on one particular thing. कि नींबू खा लेते हैं हम, फिर ये हल्दी वाला दूध पी लेते हैं. I suggest to parents, do not change anything what you've done till now. Like, we do not know whether if you start adding haldi to the doodh, and the child will start vomiting, like, because, it may not, don't change any taste at this moment, and let the child have whatever he's been having till now. Like, and काढ़ा पिला देंगे. 2 साल का बच्चा है, 3 साल का बच्चा काढ़ा पिएगा तो उल्टी करेगा. मतलब, I think like I would do as well. Like, so this is not time to experiment at this point of time. Okay, and what you should eat, for example, and people would say, okay, मुझे vitamin C खाना है, तो मतलब adults में, and there's a concoction which is going on in the adult world, like, a list of 10-15 medicines which are transferred across WhatsApp from one person to other. And I was recently looking at on a lighter note, जो COVID पता नहीं ठीक होगा नहीं होगा, but it's onchoriasis, toxoplasmosis, and then like scurvy, vitamin D, ये सब चीजें ठीक जरूर हो जाएंगी क्योंकि 10-15 और बीमारी वो है. What it also means that we may be overdoing these things without a scientific rationale. If WHO does not recommend, if the UNICEF does not recommend, if the government of India does not blindly, tell you to have this thing, or a Ministry of Health and Family Welfare does not suggest that you should be doing it, please do not overdo because somebody else is doing. Okay, so and I tell you a very simple example. Zinc is out of market, and like, zinc, you cannot find zinc. And if you say zinc to be given prophylactic, and many people ask me this question, कि हम अपने बच्चे को zinc दे दें, like prophylactically. Now, if you have zinc for 2 weeks, it's fine. That is good enough to replete, and there have been data in diarrheal diseases also that you will probably give zinc to replete and you will be fine. But if you continue to give zinc for a longer period of time, zinc being a bivalent atom, उसकी वजह से copper deficiency हो जाएगी. और copper deficiency की वजह से you will have hematological effects, and your immune system may be actually weaker compared to what you think that you're doing benefit out of giving zinc. Okay. Similarly, आपका विटामिन सी है, like, अगर आप ज़्यादा डोज में देते हो और आपको उस टाइम के लिए you will probably cause gastric upset, vomiting and diarrhea. So, and if it is given for a very long period of time, you may also risk of causing stones. Now, जितना आपको विटामिन सी डेली का चाहिए, उतना आपको एक बड़े ऑरेंज या फिर एक कप ऑफ ब्रोकली में मिल जाता है. तो आपको उससे ज्यादा देने की जरूरत नहीं. So immunity for a preventive purpose is nothing except for a good diet, and good diet is like 4 sections of a plate. So each quarter, fruits, fresh fruits and vegetables, fresh vegetables or steamed vegetables or sorted vegetables, 25% grains and 25% proteins with some dairy is something that will keep all the minerals and vitamins that you're looking for from the pharmaceutical companies in that diet, and you will not have a disease. And that's my guarantee. And I'm basing my guarantee on one single thing, that like pharmaceutical companies have come in the world for the last 100 years. The man has come to this world for 9,900 years before the pharma companies came, and all of that survived. Like, so please look at a balanced diet. Do not damage the balance of the diet. The only indication is when you have a vitamin, suppose COVID at that point of time, you might want to give zinc for 10 days or 15 days at the point of time. And vitamin D, you would want to give when your lifestyle suggests that you're not going out. And at that time, not mega doses, but a more prophylactic dose.
You remind me of one more thing, sir, that is nariyal pani. So people are getting into high potassium. Many of my patients are getting into high potassium because nariyal pani se hi hydrate kar sakte ho, pani to hydrate karta hi nahi hai.
Correct. So, and that is something so dangerous for chronic kidney disease patients and those with, who have an underlying renal pathology. But somehow because the neighbor has told them, say corona right.
So that brings me to my next question, sir. Children with comorbidities, with kidney disease, with diabetes, with asthma, does things change for them? Do they need to be more careful? And if they get infected, do things change for them?
Yeah, so if you talk about the risk factors for a severe disease, and that is similar to this thing. One is that those who have a very in the first year of life, for example, the disease is more profound, or especially in the first 1 or 2 months, that is because their immune system is not developed, and we do not know कि वैक्सीन की वजह से जो इतने बच्चे वैक्सीन लेते हैं, शायद पिछली बार ये हाइपोथेसिस था कि इतनी वैक्सीन की वजह से उनका इम्यून सिस्टम स्टिमुलेटेड रहता है, तो शायद इसीलिए उनको नहीं हो रहा डिजीज सिवियर. आई डोंट नो वो हाइपोथेसिस अभी हमने किसी ने प्रूव नहीं किया, बट अगर वो भी है तो 1 महीना 1.5 महीने की जिसको वैक्सीन नहीं लगे होते वो बच्चा सबसे ज्यादा रिस्क रहता है. एंड देन those are the ones which have medical complexity of any kind, whether it is like some genetic disorder, some neurological disorder where they have, and more commonly if there is an underlying congenital heart disease, more severe asthma. And generally asthma is again into 2 categories, one which is requiring a high dose of inhaled corticosteroid or frequent need for steroids. वो वाले होते हैं जिनको हाई रिस्क होता है, जिनका डिजीज मतलब लो डोज इनहेल्ड कॉर्टिकोस्टेरॉइड्स पे होता है, उनको जनरली ज्यादा प्रॉब्लम नहीं होती है. एंड अगेन इंसुलिन डिपेंडेंट डायबिटीज मेलाइटिस व्हिच इज लाइक रेयर बट देन डज हैपन, एंड immunosuppression because of anything, like for example somebody may be on one or the other drugs for nephrotic syndrome for example, कि वो जैसे स्टेरॉइड्स पे होगा, या फिर कोई बच्चे को कैंसर की कीमोथेरेपी मिली है उसकी वजह से हो, तो ऐसे बच्चों को रिस्क ज्यादा रहता है. एंड देन डाउन सिंड्रोम के बच्चे जो होते हैं स्पेशली, उनको भी एक थोड़ा सा रिस्क जो होता है वो ज्यादा रहता है, इन दिस थिंग. सो द रिस्क जितना लास्ट टाइम का डेटा था कि जिनको एक से ज्यादा ऐसे कोमॉर्बिडिटी थी, they accounted for 75% of the total admissions, and that is why those who do not have an underlying disease most of the times वो ज्यादा बीमार नहीं होते हैं और ठीक हो जाते हैं.
So mild symptoms can be managed at home, as you said, sir, that only moderate and severe need to come to the hospital. Is isolation different from adults? Do the children need to be separated from the adults if they are the only one infected? What happens to breastfeeding? What happens to online classes?
Okay, so interesting question. So what you're trying to say, do children transmit the infection to others? Is that the question you are trying to ask? No?
Right.
Yeah. So when it's definitely children act as a reservoir for infection. And last year, there were many asymptomatic cases and they got home the infection from the school or from other places, and they infected the older grandparents and other things. How much of it is there, we do not know. We do not know how many, but definitely there is a risk of transmission from the children to others. Okay. Now, the practical problem lies in, अगर बच्चा बहुत छोटा है, बड़ा है बच्चा तो 10, 12, 15 साल का, तो वो मान जाता है to stay alone in a room. Anyways, teens do not want parents to be around in any case. But if it is a small child, like 2 साल, 3 साल, 4 साल का बच्चा, वो manage करना मुश्किल होता है. And just before coming to this, I had a video consultant where they said कि 7 साल का बच्चा है and my wife is pregnant. So what should I do? I do not have symptoms right now, and my child does not live without the mother. I said, if it is possible, then it is you, because we need to see risk stratification. Risk stratification में कि मेरे घर में अगर मेरे 80 साल की माँ है, एक pregnant lady है और मैं हूँ, तो I should be taking care of it because I'm least likely to have effect on myself compared to this if the child is the only one affected at this point of time, you know, because the other two are at a high risk. But if the mother is like, you know, for example, the child cannot live and the mother is not pregnant and, you know, is otherwise well and not symptomatic, then unfortunately, those are the compulsions of nuclear families these days that you have to kind of comply with, because neighbors, of course, are not going to take care of that. And the child may not be comfortable like living alone. The breastfeeding ka question jo hai ki should I breastfeed my child when I'm having a COVID positive, and I'm presuming that the child is not infected. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. तो इसमें the clear cut guidelines जो है वो पहले शुरू में the China used to say कि okay, separate the mother and the baby completely, but then CDC, WHO, and then all of them, in fact there are a couple of studies from India also, from Lady Hardinge Medical College also, they proven that जब आप breastfeed देते हो तो एक आप उसको उन बीमारियों से बचाते हो जिनसे like diarrheal diseases, like ear infection, so you're less likely to fall sick. Second, अगर मेरे को कोविड है, मेरे ब्लड में भी एंटीबॉडीज हैं, and through the breast milk they will pass on to the child. Okay, so how do you reduce the risk of transmission in such children is you continue with breastfeeding. The option number one is that you can express the breast milk and, you know, keep it out for someone else to feed in the breast milk. If you cannot, then you wipe your breast with the clean, maybe, you know, wipe or something. You wear a double mask and make sure that it's not a cloth mask. It's a proper N95 mask that you're wearing. And then you use your hand sanitizer all the time. And after having fed the child, you know, you ask someone else to handle. And if it is not possible, within the same room, keep the child like at 6 feet away, because that's generally the considered that even if I sneeze, cough, you would probably want to. But if I'm excessively symptomatic, maybe that is the time you may just want to discontinue breastfeeding for some time. Suppose I'm breathless, like, you know, and I cannot keep the mask on, I need an oxygen and I want to breastfeed. That's practically not possible. So in hospitals also, symptomatic mothers with significant symptoms, we do not encourage breastfeeding. Not asymptomatic mothers, we say, okay, you keep the baby inside the room and some distance away, try to breastfeed the way I just discussed.
And if the child is also positive, mother is also positive, then normal breastfeeding can be done.
Then obviously, then, you know, the things have already passed the stage where we're looking at prevention.
So very specific question on online classes, that if the child is mild and is isolated with the parents, should they continue with the online classes or should they not?
So online classes are not a risk, like, you know, because you're not going to transmit the infection. So you need to see at your comfort. So it's like any other flu. If you're comfortable in a flu, you probably would want to go for work. If you're very having myalgia, you have a fever, I mean, I'm sure you do not think that online classes are so much important for your life that you're cannot miss out on a day. But in case you're feeling comfortable, that's the best way to keep the children engaged and not to think about corona.
Right, sir. So you mentioned about pregnant ladies, and this wave is infecting a lot of pregnant ladies, unlike the last one. But what are the chances of the unborn baby, the baby which is still yet to be born baby, to be infected from the pregnant mother during pregnancy, during delivery, and after delivery?
Okay, a very interesting question. So there is a lot of data which has come all from different centers, although it's like, you know, even from the Indian, from Maharashtra, like, because there are certain dedicated maternal and child hospitals in Maharashtra which are doing only this work. And what we have seen in this particular way, where the blood flow abnormalities have been more in, like, you have alteration because of thrombosis, or you're like clotting of the blood inside the smaller vessels. In pregnant females, we've seen this time the pregnant females are relatively more stable. In fact, last year, one of the papers we published was that we did routine screening of all the mothers, and we had almost 1,000 babies, mothers pair, and none of them children had any kind of an affliction, like, and that's the paper we published last month. But now this year, what I'm seeing is that, like, most mothers are symptomatic, and many a times they would have premature deliveries because one is, of course, probably could be anxiety, but the other reasons is that their uterine flows start becoming really abnormal. Like, the 3 days back, you've done an ultrasound, everything was fine. And today you see the blood flow to the placenta diminished significantly to the blood. So much so that one of the child like had a very flat CTG value. And then we had to take out the child immediately, thankfully. That's right. So that's an impact, and I'm sure, I don't exactly know the data, but then many stillborns and abortions happening because of early pregnancy COVID afflictions. In terms of once the child is born, there are 3 modes, of infections. One is through the, at the time of intrauterine transmission, like, the passing through the placenta into the baby. Then second is like having an infection immediately after birth through when the baby passes through the birth canal. And the third is like a horizontal transmission when the child is with the mother and the baby at home. Now, among that, the antenatal transmission all has been suspected, but not really proven to be, a major mode. And in fact, there are 1 or 2 studies which are of doubtful quality, of 1 or 2 cases of like where the children are were affected. But as I speak today, and I'm talking of last year's data, but this year we had 2 babies where like the mother was positive and the child was separated in the NICU, and the children are COVID positive. So they either required antenatally or required at the time of birth, like, and then horizontal transmission when at home, mother is symptomatic and she's having fever. There are a number of cases which are coming and saying, okay, this like बच्चा पहले तो ठीक था, अब इसको सांस की तकलीफ हो गई है या फिर like.
So there is horizontal transmission, which is definitely happening this time.
Because not only, as I said, this time the problem is not only the mother in the family is affected. Like, care करने वाले सारों को ही हो गया. Like mother है, father है, grandmother है, सबको ही like COVID हो जाता है एक ही साथ. And then someone would pass on because somebody has to fend for the child.
So, sir, you mentioned about stillbirths. You mentioned about premature births because of the blood supply itself getting disrupted to the fetus. Is there something in pregnant ladies which can be done to prevent these things?
So basically, I mean, as of now, we do not know whether this is like there is some preventive measure for COVID, and can be prevented. All we suggest to the pregnant female is that we should probably not come in contact with anyone who's like, and for the next 3 months or 6 months when we are even expecting a third wave. So all those who are pregnant, I would suggest sincerely that do not go out and mix with anyone whom you do not need to move around. And then it's important to look after your medical condition as such, because sometimes if you have an underlying, say for example, you have a pregnancy-induced hypertension, in that scenario, that's a comorbid condition. Like you have an uncontrolled diabetes, for example, and that's a comorbid condition. The risk to you also increases and the risk to the fetus also increases. So make sure that you take care of, at least if you before becoming pregnant, take care of some of the comorbidities if you can, and if you're not, at least when you're pregnant already, make sure that you adhere to the treatment guidelines issued by your doctor. And the last thing which you would probably again is a debate, which will elicit a lot of responses, is should we get a vaccine done? So yes, like CDC and UK, where the trials were done and many of the healthcare workers were pregnant and breastfeeding at that point of time, they received the vaccine, and for CDC's guidelines suggest the risk of death or the morbidity in pregnant women is high, so they should get a vaccine done for sure. The government of India, on the other hand, if you register on the CoWIN app, it does not give you an access if you say, okay, I'm breastfeeding or I'm pregnant. It's largely because you do not have, they're not, they have not tested in that particular population, this particular thing. And if you're not tested, any legal authority would not give and say, okay, you should get it done. So as an individual opinion, it may be different from a government. It has to cater to a legal requirement. And of course, that is the reason. Till the time they're doing, in fact, today I was reading There now Covaxin is doing a trial on some babies between 2 to 19 years of age as well to see the safety of it. And some of the countries have already licensed it for more than 12 years, considering the third wave. So maybe we'll have vaccines coming for everyone soon.
Soon, sir. How soon we'll have vaccines for kids? Because everybody is worried that the third wave is going to definitely hit the kids because rest everybody is going to be vaccinated. Although I don't believe that everybody will get vaccinated so soon. But what is your perspective on kids getting vaccinated and how soon the vaccination will be out?
So I think, like, you know, when the government has to roll out a program at a national level and to, vaccinate, it probably takes into account that I need to vaccinate 1.4 billion or I need to vaccinate none. So that's the kind of a public health strategy that we need to look at. So government is going to be the only consumer of vaccines for another 6 months. So I do not think they would employ a private players to run it, but it is not going to be openly, freely available. That's my thinking. Maybe I'm wrong. So then when the government looks at it, it looks like, how do we reduce the burden in the society? So one of the things last time they did, they started with 60 years and above, 45 and above, understanding that these were the highest risk of deaths. Then the next segment, which is responsible for spreading the infection, is the people between 18 to 45, because they keep on moving around all over the place. They do business, they go out, so the super spreaders, so getting them to vaccinate. And once these two segments are done, maybe children would have their vaccines available, and maybe, that's how but I don't see it coming before 4 to 6 months at least.
Right, sir. So we are already 50 minutes into the talk, sir. We have had more than 200 shares, more than 1,000 people reached. I won't take much of your time, already taken a lot. Last two questions, sir. One, is the adult cocktail applicable to the teens and adolescents also, or the treatment guidelines are different for adolescents and teens? That's my second last question. And my last question is, there is an entity called multisystemic inflammatory syndrome, which we are seeing in children. What is that? And are you seeing a shortage of ventilators for children also? Because adult world, we have crossed all parameters.
Okay. So the first thing, I think, if you look at the adult cocktail, it started with one, it's like a chain reaction. So the first doctor who would have written the first vitamin C, and by the time it reached the 10th doctor, he added vitamin D, and by the time it reached the 100th doctor, he added vitamin C, and then ivermectin, doxycycline, and the corona would would be bathing in with all this medicines. But futile exercise, one needs to basically understand one thing: you cannot put fire on with water. You need a kerosene for this thing. So similarly, the treatment we are planning, like doxycycline, ivermectins, and this thing, were based on small trials, and then they were fizzled out. So last year there was so much talk about hydroxychloroquine, and everybody started, including doctors, started taking hydroxychloroquine every week until they realized. And now this year nobody talks about hydroxychloroquine. I'm sure another 6 months nobody would talk of ivermectin and azithromycin. I don't know whether these are vested interests, lack of knowledge, lack of adherence to guidelines, but it is and I'm not squarely responsible, holding anyone responsible for that. But I think as a medical fraternity is also partly responsible for this kind of mayhem in terms of antibiotics and these things, and the people also need to take equal responsibility for their health. And when some people come to me, doctor, dawai de do, and say ye dawai hai, and they say, and I said, you need to ask me. You're as a responsible patient, you need to ask me, what is this medicine? What are you taking for? And or ye iska side effect kya hai? And more importantly, what is the efficacy based on which you have given this medication? Okay. On the contrary, most patients ask me, doctor, is it theek ho jayega? the answer is like, if you ask me a layman's question, layman's answer you will get. But I would suggest that you become responsible citizens. When you make an investment into stock, you ask this question. When you make an investment into house, you ask this question. Leakage कहाँ पे है, location क्या पे है, ये सारी चीजें पूछते हो. अपनी health के लिए ये भी पूछो कि ये दवाई जो खा रहे हो, इसका benefit कहाँ पे documented है, scientific literature में. And when you ask this question, you will find that WHO guidelines do not recommend doxycycline, ivermectin, and Fabiflu, and whatever this thing. The AIMS director, Dr. Guleria, other day was on the news channel saying that none of them work. Ministry of Health and Family Welfare nowhere mentioned. So there is no role for antibiotics like doxycycline and azithromycin. Azithromycin you may still want to use because of two reasons. One, you may have an anti-inflammatory effect. And second is that you may have dealing with some kind of a mild infection because most of us are doing video consults and may not know. But doxycycline is something which is not, and ivermectins are not required. And more importantly, Fabiflu is one thing which is given in adults, and when with the instruction to the breastfeeding woman, क्योंकि आप ये दवाई खा रहे हो, आपको breastfeeding बंद करनी पड़ेगी. That's a bigger crime. Understanding that child is going to be his survival, his IQ, his long-term productivity, protection against diseases, so much dependent on breastfeeding. Whereas Fabiflu has never been proven to be effective. So teens and as far as children, sticking to my domain, I would suggest that you do not need anything. There is not even one single proven therapy. The treatments are required for people who get hospitalized, whether it is children, whether it's adults. And remdesivir is not a major magic bullet. And all of a sudden, from the last 2 weeks to today, so many less people talking of remdesivir now. So there are plasma therapies have also gone out of questions. So I would suggest that you stick to your doctor, what he recommends, and talk normal diet, treat as flu, and if you're getting symptomatic, go to the hospital. And what was the second question that you asked? I can't hear you, sorry.
So the new syndrome which has come, the multi-inflammatory syndrome.
Yes. So again, that's like multicystic, what do you call that? The multi-system inflammatory syndrome. This is like a post-COVID kind of a syndrome. Again, first and foremost, let me tell you, this is a rare evidence. So what you read in Google does not mean it happens every. It's for the doctor to suspect it. But as of now, not more than 1,000 or 2,000 cases of multi-system inflammatory disorder would have been reported across the world. The last year, when I read about the literature, it was around 150 cases reported. So I'm sure some underreported, some more reported, but 1,000, 2,000 से ज़्यादा नहीं होगा. But how do you identify that? कि अगर आपको एक बार कोविड हुआ 2 से 4 हफ्ते के बाद आपका फीवर हाई ग्रेड आ गया वापस आपको a stream 60% would have severe diarrhea and vomiting coming at, and it's not a mild fever with an eye becoming red, the rash coming up like really heavy. So these are some of the signs that you may be having MISC. You report back to the doctor. He would probably check it, and if required, then you admit for IVIG and steroids into the hospital. But again, just because your eyes are slightly red and your fever is 99 kind of a thing, so that is generally not multisystem inflammatory disorder. And rare things happen rarely in medicine. That's the dictum I was told. And so it's good to suspect, but don't over suspect it in your children.
One thing, again, the medical dictum which we all learned was we treat patients and not reports. Fortunately, people are not very much aggressive in getting blood tests and CT scans to be done in children, which again, the adult world is flooding with. Thanks for your time, sir. It was a lovely session, very, very enriching, very, very simple language. Any last words for our audience and children?
Again, as I said, just keep your cool. We all understand that we're going through a tough phase where we will probably hear bad news from one or the other quarters. It's also important as a doctor. When I was absolutely not believing in kind of in positive energy, negative energy, but having seen pandemics there and having met so many positive people, I realized that it's time for us to keep a positive environment at home. And that will be the biggest healing exercise that you could do to yourself. Your children do not need to know how many people died of oxygen shortage, and switch off the TVs. Spend time, look at a positive of it. And if you have symptoms, it is best to consult the person whom you are doing and trust him completely. It's important. In India, I've seen many times we have a deficit of trust, and then we take one opinion, second opinion, third opinion. Eventually, we get a concoction. We don't know what is right. The intent of every person is to help you. It's like, so it's up to you to decide who's the best or the expert in the whole gamut of people who you're reaching out to. So take the most expert advice and then stick to that. Even if it is wrong, it's probably a chance error which will happen anywhere. But there is no way you would know, because people come and say, "Agar humne isko ye kar diya hota to ye hota, wo kar diya hota to ye hota." This is typical of filmy Bollywood dialogue. We all are there to help you. And as I said, important to question the medicines which are being given, so that we don't overdrug our children at any point of time.
Thank you, sir. Very well said. One of my patients had 5 prescriptions and said which one to follow. And my simple answer was, either you can have a lucky draw or you can go with a simple majority, whichever you'll hit. So that's the.
Or if you have a child at home, then you can play that game Pinky Ponky.
Yeah. So whatever you want to do, people are literally harming themselves by doing this. So stay safe, sir. Keep on saving more lives. I know difficult times, but this too shall pass. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful having you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Take care.